Welcome to the Harvest of the Month Local Foods Training on Apples. So apples are one of the first signs of a changing cooling season here in Maine. We are lucky to have a huge variety of apples that have been preserved in our state. The more varieties of apples we have access to, the more flavors we get to try. Incorporating apples is an easy way to get local food into our school children, but going beyond simply offering a whole apple to munch on is pretty easy too. In this training, we will be highlighting some great recipes that use local apples. Through the Harvest of the Month program, though the Harvest of the Month program features apples for the month of October, local varieties are often available into the winter and even in the spring. So my name is Robin Kerber, and I am the Farm and Seed to School Coordinator with the Child Nutrition Program at Maine Department of Education. My background is in farming and in cooking, and I am happy to be taking part in these local foods trainings. So to complete this training and be eligible for additional reimbursement within the local produce fund, there's a series of tasks that you have to complete. And you just need one person from each district to be eligible, though as many as you want can participate. There's no cap on that. So the first step is to watch this presentation in its entirety, and then watch all accompanying culinary demo videos, download and review the recipes that go along with those videos, and then email me when you've done all of this. And somewhere in this presentation, there's a question that you have to answer, and email me so I will know if you have participated in the whole training. So the goals for this presentation is designed to help us all get a better, deeper understanding of apples. I think that the more we know about the ingredients and products that we're using in our kitchens, the more comfortable we are in handling them, and the more likely we are to feel creatively inspired or excited to feature them. So it's easy enough to throw an apple into a bag lunch, but what other ways can we creatively use this readily available local ingredient in our kitchens? Think savory, think sweet, the sky is the limit. In this presentation, we will start with simple product knowledge. What are apples? Where did they come from? We will learn about how apples came to be a staple in our fall diets and a popular item in many school cafeterias. We will go over the recipes that the accompanying videos show, and I'll introduce our guest chef, Ben Ramsdell, who was featured in our apple videos. We will wrap up the presentation by going over how to source locally for apples and highlight some neat varieties that thrive on many Maine orchards. So a brief history of the apple. The apple emerged as a celebrated fruit at the beginning of history. Whether you start with Adam and Eve or the anthropological data on Stone Age people in Europe, the apple was there. Greek and Roman mythology referred to the apple as symbols of love and beauty. When the Romans conquered England about the 1st century BC, they brought apple cultivation with them. The Pilgrims discovered crab apples had preceded them to America, but the fruit was not very edible. So the Massachusetts Bay Colony requested seeds and cuttings from England, which were brought over on later voyages of the Mayflower. Other Europeans brought apple stock to Virginia in the Southwest, and a Massachusetts man, John Chapman, became famous for planting trees throughout Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. He became known as Johnny Appleseed, so yes, that was a real person. As the country was settled, nearly every family farm grew some apples. I included this picture because, I mean, we've all seen those gnarly looking apple trees that look like they should have fallen over 100 years ago, but somehow not only are still growing and somewhat standing, but are producing some really cool varieties. And this time of year, especially in fall in Maine, we just see so many apples littering the roads and the sidewalks, and just we really have so many here in the state. It's pretty cool. So although some were very good, most of the early varieties would be considered poor today. Of nearly 8,000 varieties known around the world, about 100 are grown commercial quantity in the US, with the top 10 comprising over 90% of the crop. Our modern orchards combine the rich heritage of apple growing with research and field trials to grow an annual US crop exceeding 220 million bushels. New varieties are still being discovered and cultivated, with the best eventually becoming household words like Mcintosh, delicious, Rome, and Cortland. Recent arrivals include Honeycrisp, Gala, Gingergold, and more than a few throwbacks to antique varieties enjoying a resurgence. And I'm going to go over some different varieties later in this presentation because the history is cool, but it's also good to know which recipes would work best with which apples. There are well over 100 varieties of apples currently grown in Maine, but most farms grow about 20 to 30 different varieties. Currently, Mcintosh is the most commonly grown variety in New England and remains one of the top 10 most widely grown varieties in the U.S. The Mcintosh apple originated in the wild in Ontario, where John Mcintosh selected it from the woods near his home over 200 years ago. So all Mcintosh apples can be traced back to that one tree in Ontario. From the original tree, he and his family propagated additional Mcintosh trees by grafting its buds into rootstocks. Most apple trees are propagated by bud grafting, a technique that joins two plants into one. Since apples do not come true to type from seed and do not readily form roots on cuttings, they are grafted into easy-to-root stalks that serve as the root system. So that's a pretty unique way that a lot of fruit trees are grown. Through grafting, one can obtain another plant that has the same traits as the original plant from which it was obtained. To bud graft, one inserts a bud between the bark and wood of a stem on another tree. Once the bud heals, the shoot above it is cut off, and the bud grows into a shoot that will eventually become the upper part of the tree. This part of the tree is called the scion. The rootstock remains distinct from the scion. So I've seen a picture of a tree with 30 different varieties of apples growing on it because it had 30 different kinds of grafts. So it's really cool what you can do with nature. And here's a little visual of some of those scions and rootstocks that I was just talking about. Although the vast majority of these seedlings produce little more than hog feed, every now and then something special happened. When a farmer recognized the quality in one of these chance seedlings, he would snip off a shoot and graft it onto the living rootstock of another apple tree. The shoot, known as a scion, provides the blueprint for all the apples produced by that tree, which will be an identical clone of the original. A few years of such grafts, and the farmer might have a whole orchard of that new fruit. Then his neighbors would ask for grafts of his tasty apples, often naming them after the original farm or farmer. This is how apple varieties come into existence. Every Mcintosh is a graft of the original tree that John Mcintosh forgot to cut down on his Ontario farm in 1811. Every Granny Smith stems from the chance seedling spotted by Maria Ann Smith in her Australian compost pile in 1868. So there's a lot of really cool history with apples. And because of that, there are so many different varieties. And the Common Ground Fair, of course, is canceled this year, but we have some real apple experts in the state who come to the fair, and I always get a kick out of seeing people bring apple samples from their farms and homesteads and to have them identified. It's sort of like a little statewide treasure hunt for some of the local experts. So where did such diversity come from? To our modern eyes, it all seems suspiciously like the work of some genetic engineer who took the innocent apple genome and slipped in a gene from a strawberry or a clownfish. But in fact, all the genetic tinkering was done by the apple itself during its evolutionary journey from the wild forests of Kazakhstan to the fields of Europe and America. The apple has a large genome full of recessive genes and genetic switches. In every apple seed, the genetic deck is reshuffled, and many traits that were invisible in the parent may suddenly turn up in the child, or vice versa. What this means is that apples do not come true from seed. If you grow a tree from a Mcintosh seed, it will have half the genes of its Mcintosh mom and half the genes of its dad. But its apples won't resemble either parents. The apples may not fall far from the tree, but the next generation of apples will be, genetically speaking, 1,000,000 miles away. Such seedling trees line the dirt roads, stone walls, cellar holes, and overgrown fields of rural Maine. So now I just wanted to talk about some of the different varieties of apples that you will most likely work with in your kitchens or pick from orchards or see lining the shelves of the grocery stores. Starting with the Golden Delicious. This all-purpose apple may share part of its name with the Red Delicious, but the two are not related. These yellow apples are bright and cheery. They're soft apples as well, although not as soft to the touch as something like a Mcintosh. Thin-skinned, the Golden Delicious doesn't store well because it can bruise and shrivel, so try to use it as soon as possible. This apple is ideal for pies, salads, sauces, and freezing. Jonagold. A lovely red hue with hints of yellow, this species is a hybrid of the Jonathan and the Golden Delicious, and bears a faint physical resemblance to both, hence the name Jonah from Jonathan and gold from golden. It was developed by Cornell University's College of Agriculture in 1953. Like the Golden Delicious, Jonagold is sweet and thin-skinned, but it takes from the Jonathan a smooth skin and tart flavor. It is versatile and can be used in any recipe that calls for apples, so that's a real great one. Cameo, becoming a little bit more popular, though still not quite a household name. So although this apple was discovered in Washington State in 1987, it quickly grew in popularity. So it's pretty recent, just over 30 years. Juicy, crisp, and sweet with just a touch of tart, the Cameo was thought to come from both the red and yellow delicious. That explains its shape as well as the somewhat striated look of its red and yellow skin, which is thicker than the Golden Delicious but thinner than the red. Try substituting Cameos for Goldens in baking and cooking. This variety is especially delicious when eaten raw. The Empire. A cross between a Mcintosh and a Red Delicious. The Empire was developed by researchers at the New York State Agriculture Experimental Station in 1966. So you'll sense a theme here, a lot of varieties coming from New York and the Northeast and all of the apple trees that grow in Maine. And the reason for that is apples originated, like I said earlier, in Kazakhstan, which is on the same latitude as this part of the country. So they really do thrive in this environment. Anyway, the Empire apple is generally quite round with a soft skin that's bright red with hints of green. The interior is crisp and creamy white. The Empire is firmer than the Mac, so it makes for a good cooking apple. So when you're cooking apples, you want to look for something that's firm, and that's why, Mcintosh is great for munching on, but it would basically turn to applesauce in your pie. So look for the firm, crisp apples when cooking. Of course, the Mcintosh, my least favorite, but a very common and very popular one. This soft flesh can be described as creamy or mealy. I definitely think it's mealy, which makes this variety a good candidate for eating raw or for applesauce or apple butter, but not necessarily for baking. If you bake with Macs, use a thickener to keep the apples from becoming too mushy. Fuji. Created by Japanese growers in the 1930s, the Fuji apple's popularity grew in the US during the 1980s and has quickly become one of the most popular in the country. It's a large, crisp apple, a relative of the Red Delicious, with an intense sweetness that makes for this an ideal candidate for eating raw. Try adding Fujis to salads and slaws that require very little to no cooking to keep their consistency. So this is a really great one to shred into a salad, to slice up and serve with some peanut butter. It's a nice, crisp snacking apple. The Cortland. It's an understandable mistake to confuse this apple with a Mcintosh. Both are on the squat side with creamy white interiors and sweet tart flavor. The Cortland is a relatively soft apple, although not quite as soft as the Mac. And unlike the Mac, the Cortland functions as an all-purpose apple. So remember that Mac, really not good for cooking, but the Cortland, you can bake it, you can cook it, you can eat it raw. And then on the next slide, we have our most popular apple variety. So take a second to guess. I would have probably guessed the Mac, but the most popular in the US is the Red Delicious. Taller than it is wide. Oh, no. This is the most popular apple variety in the US. It is top heavy. It has a creamy white interior. While juicy, the Red Delicious is a soft apple and will not cook well. It's best to eat raw. Gala. Taller than it is wide, the Gala's shape is similar to that of the Golden and Red Delicious. It has a pleasantly mild, sweet taste and a crisp texture, and it's one of the lighter hued red apples, boasting bright yellow undertones. It is one of the relatively small apples of this roundup. Like Fuji's, Galas are easy to eat uncooked thanks to their thin skin and overall sweetness. They are also really great for cooking. So they cooked, uncooked, pretty versatile apple. The Granny Smith is probably your go-to for cooking in pies. You can't miss this apple, originally from Australia, with its bright skin, hard feel, crisp bite, and extremely tart taste. I would not say extremely, because I have eaten many apples from trees growing along the side of the road, and I would say that those are puckeringly tart. And in comparison, this one is very sweet. But when it's really ripe, the green skin usually has a touch of rosy red. While some savor the tartness, others prefer to cook it, which sweetens it up. It is an ideal complement to savory foods such as onions and cheese. So this is a really good one to slice and put on a grilled cheese sandwich. On an aesthetic note, the green skin provides a great visual element to any dish. There's a couple more here. The Braeburn, originating from New Zealand, this apple has a skin that's muted red with golden yellow undertones and tinges of faint green. It is firm, crisp bite, and offers a pleasing balance of sweet and tart. Braeburns are good for baking as well as eating just the way they are. And then I wanted to highlight this really cool local variety. That graphic is from our Harvest of the Month material. The local artist did a really wonderful job with those. So Black Oxford is Maine's most famous apple. In his book, The Apples of Maine, George Stulphin writes, Black Oxford was found as a seedling by Nathaniel Haskell on the farm of one Valentine, a nailmaker and farmer of Paris in Oxford County, about 1790, and the original tree was still standing in 1907. Very old trees are still thriving in many central and southern Maine locations. There's a Black Oxford tree in Hollowell that was planted in 1799 and is still producing apples. The medium-sized, round, deep purple fruit has a blackish bloom. From a distance, you might think you've discovered a huge plum. Because of its unusual light pink flowers in spring, you could plant it as an ornamental. Black Oxford is an all-purpose variety and is recommended for everything: eating, pies, cider. Leave the skins on for a delightful pink sauce, because the skins will dissolve if you do use it. So that's a really cool local heirloom variety. All right, on to the recipes that are included in this local foods training. So the recipe demos that will go along with this training all fit into school nutrition guidelines. One of the recipes for apple cranberry salad was developed as part of the Harvest of the Month program. 3 other recipes include an Aztec grain salad that uses quinoa, a complete vegetarian protein, with roasted apples and butternut squash. The Honey Crisp is a classic apple dessert, snack, or side dish. This crisp is lightly sweetened with honey and is best served warm with a small dollop of vanilla yogurt or whipped cream. The sweet potato latkes, which is the photo here, are a favorite of Chef Ben. We lightened up the traditional fried latkes by baking them in the oven. These latkes are packed with shredded sweet potato and apple and are seriously delicious. As part of this training, please download the recipe files and watch the culinary demonstration videos to familiarize yourself with these recipes. And I wanted to introduce our guest chef for the local foods apple training. Chef Ben Ramsdell comes to us from Maine General Hospital, where he is a culinary coordinator and chef educator. He has helped with these trainings in the past, and we were lucky to recruit him for this apple training, as well as our upcoming brassicas training. He is also a board member of Full Plate's Full Potential. He is committed to addressing the problems of child hunger that are systemic throughout Maine. Ben is a graduate of the Culinary Institute of America, which is also where I went to school, and he is a native to Maine. And now that we've learned about all of our different varieties of apples and know what we're going to be cooking with them, just a quick overview on how to buy and store apples. Choose firm and shiny apples when shopping. When buying apples, choose those without any bruises or soft, mushy spots. They should be firm for their specific variety. For example, a Mcintosh will not be as firm as a Granny Smith. Look for fruit with shiny skin. Dull skin hints at a lack of crispness and flavor. Keep them cool. Apples quickly lose their crispness at room temperature. If you have space, store them in your walk-in or reach-in cooler. Use lemon juice to keep your sliced apples fresh. If you're slicing apples and don't want the exposed pieces to turn brown, dump the slices in a bowl of 3 parts water to 1 part lemon juice. And now for a quick spotlight on one of the local orchards here in Maine, Bailey's Orchard. Bailey's Orchard has been owned and operated by the same family for over 60 years. They raise over 50 apple varieties. You can pick your own or buy them from the barn, where they also sell crab apples, plums, pears, squash gourds, honey, fudge, and cider. They also press their own cider, and their barn is open starting mid-August, so it's open right now, and U-Pick starts Labor Day weekend. Their hours are 9 to 6 daily. The orchard was started over 60 years ago by Jesse and Maxine Bailey. The orchard sits on a 100-acre plot of land. Approximately half of the land is in forest and the rest field and orchard. The farm has been in the family for over 200 years. The barn they used to run their business in was built out of lumber cut from their own forest over 100 years ago by Jesse Bailey. The orchard is now run by second and third generations of the Bailey family. All right, so that completes this part of the virtual local foods training. We've just completed this presentation. And read this slide, you will see that you need to email me letting me know that you finished this part of the presentation, and let me know what your favorite fall food is. And then please complete the rest of the training, watch the culinary demo videos, download, review, and hopefully use those recipes in your own kitchen. And let me know when you're done, and your school district will be eligible for that additional reimbursement. Thank you so much.